Okay, so far, the visions of Zechariah up till chapter 5, they have been mostly positive for Israel. Most of them have been good. You've seen the enlargement, the defeat of their enemies, this restoration, the light that would come in and provide light, not with hands, but with the Spirit of God. All of this has been going pretty well. But Zechariah also has some bad news that there's coming a judgment. A judgment's coming, and that's what we're going to see here in chapter 5. So we'll start with verse 1. This vision of this flying scroll says, "Then I turned and lifted up mine eyes and looked, and behold, a flying roll or scroll. And he said unto me, What seest thou? And I answered, I see a flying roll. The length thereof is 20 cubits, and the breadth thereof 10 cubits. This is huge. This is a massive scroll. This is actually the size of the tabernacle. Okay, this is not a small scroll that he sees up there. Because why? Judgment's going to begin at the house of God, right? We read that in 1 Peter 4:17, where it says, the judgment becomes in the house of God. Well, here we have this scroll that's going to start with Israel, this judgment. So verse 3 says, Then he said unto me, This is the curse that goeth forth over the face of the whole earth. This scroll contains the wrath of God. Wonder if we're going to see any scroll that fills this. For everyone that stealeth shall be cut off, as on this side according to it, and everyone that sweareth shall be cut off on that side according to it. Wow, a scroll written on both sides contains the wrath of God. Some people will argue that seven-sealed scroll that we see in Revelation doesn't include the entire wrath of God. But here it seems that this curse is going over the whole earth, right? He says, I will bring it forth, saith the Lord of hosts. So God is the one releasing this scroll. And it shall enter into the house of the thief, into the house of him that sweareth falsely by my name. And it shall remain in the midst of his house, and shall consume it with the timber thereof and the stones thereof. So the judgment of God, the wrath of God is going to go out on the whole world. The scroll is written on both sides. Judgment's coming from the opening of the scroll. There's going to be a curse that doesn't just fall on Israel. He says this is the curse that goes over the whole world. You see the similarities we see between here and the scroll of Revelation, right? So the Bible tells us, right, that we're redeemed from the curse, right? Doesn't the Bible tell us in Galatians, Christ has redeemed us from the curse of the law, being made a curse for us, as it is written, cursed is everyone that hangeth on a tree. So how on earth can the entire world suffer from this curse, but we be excluded from it? There's only one answer. The blood of the Lamb. And we have to be removed from the world. We have to be removed from the world for this to affect the whole world, but not affect us. And that's exactly what happens. That tells us again of what? The rapture, the removal of the saved.
Just a little side comment.
Yes, sir.
A while back, letter mentioned us being the ambassadors in the world, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And when you think about it, any leader of a country or a kingdom, when he's getting ready to declare war on a country or the earth in general,
Removes his
his
ambassadors.
ambassadors home first.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Too.
Yeah, absolutely. And we are not under the curse. That's it. We have been removed. All right. Mm-hmm. So we hear now, okay, so God is going to remove us before this scroll goes out to the whole earth. That's what I believe the Bible teaches all throughout. So in the previous vision, God had told them, right? So right now we know that God is going to have a royal priesthood. That's from the New Testament, right? We understand that there's a royal priesthood. The church, the light of the world from the previous chapter, would be restored, would give light to the world. So what happens to the sin that's in the world when this judgment happens? When this judgment comes down on the whole world, what happens to the sin? That's going to start in verse 5 of chapter 5. There's a woman in a basket here. So or as we call the original basket case. So, so then the angel that talked with me went forth and said unto me, lift up now thine eyes and see what is this that goeth forth. What's going on over there? And of course, Zechariah, as usual, what is it? What's that? And he said, this is an ephah that goeth forth. He said, moreover, this is their resemblance throughout all the earth. Did you have something, Gingy?
No, I was just thinking, what is it? Isn't that the
Manna.
manna?
Yep, exactly.
The definition of manna. What is
So he says, what is it? He says, this is the ephah going forth. So an ephah is something you'd use to measure, right? You're measuring something that's going forth. And he says, this is an ephah, and its likeness or its resemblance is throughout all the earth. So whatever this basket's carrying, it's from the entire world. Okay, it's symbolizing something from the entire earth. So you're looking at something that may be about 7 gallons worth, right? You'd use it to measure barley or grain or something along those lines. So this ephah is coming out of those who are cursed, those who are receiving this curse. So what is symbolized by all this? Well, verse 7 goes on. It says, behold, there was lifted up a talent of lead. So there's a lid on this thing made of lead. And this is a woman that sitteth in the midst of the ephah. So inside this basket with this lead covered, it's sealing in a woman, this woman sitting inside. It's a weird vision. But we also know that there's going to be another vision of a woman who represents wickedness. This isn't the last woman we're going to see who represents wickedness. Now we know there are women who represent the redeemed, the bride of Christ, we call her, right? We also know there's a woman that represents Israel, right? And then we also know there's a woman who represents mystery Babylon, who represents wickedness and evilness and a false church, okay? A false religion that goes over the whole world, also known as the great harlot, okay? Or the great whore.
Yeah, use the modern vernacular.
Okay.
The great host. You don't have to say that word.
All right, so this great harlot, we're going to see what this woman, she's going to be removed from the world. So verse 8 says, and he said, so who is this woman? He's going to explain it to him. This is wickedness. And he cast it into the midst of the ephah, and he cast the weight of lead upon the mouth thereof. So this woman, she's the personification of evil, of sin, of wickedness, of a false religious system that comes from the entire world. Where do we see in the Bible that this religious system will spread across the entire world? Well, we know there's going to be a false prophet reigning with who we call the Antichrist, right? Who convinces the whole world to follow his false religion, which is going to be a gluing together of all these other religions underneath it and say, this is the true faith, which of course is not. So the whole Gentile world is going to be deceived by this woman. And many people will follow the false teachings of this false religion. So she's thrown in the basket and is sealed in there. The lead is put back on top. Because when Christ comes to reign on this earth, all this wickedness is not going to be allowed. That does not mean that everyone who is alive during the millennium is saved. We know by the end of the millennium, many of them rebel. But it does mean that all the unrighteousness is dealt with. Wickedness is dealt with. Murder, all of these evil things. Satan is actually put away where he can't tempt people, right? And people are being reigned over by Christ and those who are part of the church and the 12 apostles, the Bible tells us. 12 apostles leading over Israel and those of the church reigning with him around the world. So then this wickedness is going to be removed. So he looked up in verse 9. He says, then I lifted up mine eyes and looked, and behold, there came out 2 women, and the wind was in their wings, for they had wings like the wings of a stork. They're being blown away here. And they lifted up the ephah between the earth and the heaven. So the woman's now in the basket. She's sealed in by lead. These 2 women come with the wings of the stork. Now, some Bible commentators will say, well, these 2 women must be the Assyrians and the Babylonians because there's the ones who carried away Israel. But remember, this prophecy, for it to be prophetic, talks about the future. Assyria and Babylon had come and gone. We're beyond that right now, right? So this is something that's happening yet future. These women carry this woman away. And of course, what's Zechariah want to know? Where are they taking her? You know, where is this wickedness going? Verse 10 says, and I said unto the angel that talked with me, whither do these bear the ephah? And he said unto me, to build it a house in the land of Shinar, and it shall be established and set there upon her own base. So this woman, carried away by these two other women with stork arms, which again, stork is an unclean animal, right? It's not something that would be considered a righteous. These are not angels. These are women that are unclean, representing more wickedness. Now, some people say, well, maybe these two women carrying away are representing Zerubbabel and Joshua taking wickedness out of Israel. I don't think that makes an ounce of sense. I don't think that follows what we're talking about here. The fact is that wickedness will be removed from Israel, but here the Bible tells us it will be taken to Babylon and be established on its base. So wickedness will have a new throne, a place where it tries to rule from. Where it started, back to the origins, right? So I believe this prophecy is speaking of the day of the Lord. It's talking about this false religion that will come, and it's tied to the curse that we were talking about earlier in the chapter. I believe that when Mystery Babylon, this false world religious system, comes to power, it will need a headquarters. I do not believe, as many people do, that Mystery Babylon is a current church that we currently see on the earth. I do believe that people that belong to certain churches will join unto it. So I don't think you can call it this denomination or that denomination. But I think many who think they're Christians, but are Christian in name only, who have never accepted Christ, will come together with this new false religion, and it will have a new headquarters. Now, is it just spiritually Babylon, or does it physically Babylon? I don't know. But I do personally believe that it will be headquartered in physical Babylon. I do believe that when it's destroyed, people don't only mourn the loss of spiritual Babylon, they mourn the loss of physical Babylon. Because the Bible tells us in Jeremiah 51 that when Babylon is destroyed, it will be destroyed forever, never to be inhabited again. People still live in Babylon today. Saddam Hussein rebuilt a lot of the temple in Babylon, or excuse me, a lot of the palace in Babylon. So there's still things going on. So I believe that whenever it talks about all the kings committing fornication, all of the nations of the world will essentially pay homage to this new religious system, even though it's going to be very short-lived, because it's all going to take place during the tribulation, and then ultimately will be wiped out, just as the book of Revelation tells us, okay? And I think that you're going to see both a spiritual and a physical destruction of literal Babylon. And that brings us to an end of chapter 5.